Well, good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. It's good to be back offering a webinar with my colleagues at Contact North, where I am a research associate and have been for over 25 years now. Um, this is quite a large show, but I want to start off with a couple of acknowledgements. The first is that this is coming to you from Treaty 6 territory. And I just want to acknowledge this land and the people who lived here and live here, the First Nations, Métis and Inuit, and all First Peoples of Canada, with whom I'm currently working extensively on some innovative educational projects, some of which involve AI and virtual reality. And I also want to acknowledge that this is D-Day. I have relatives in my distant past who died there. And it's just worth remembering that we're here and free to talk because of the work and activities and engagements that those young people did on this day. So for those of you who don't know who I am, I'm old. I've been around this business for a long, long time. I've been teaching in higher education since 1972. Sometimes it feels like 1066, but it's 1972. And I've worked at all sorts of institutions, mainly though in open distance education institutions like the Open University and Athabasca University, which is where I spent the bulk of my career. I now teach still the MBA program at Athabasca, which I helped to found. And I also teach at the University of Alberta in the Faculty of Education. I teach graduate studies. I teach futures thinking to future school leaders. I'm now at 42 books. I have 3 books coming out this year, not to mention another novel. So I've been busy writing, and I had on my passport since the age of 14 that I'm a writer. So that's why I'm still addicted to it. I have to live up to my own decision at 14 to say that's what I was. This is what I want to do. I want us to just explore the landscape. I'm going to quickly talk about 15 practical use cases for AI in higher education. This is not the focus, the substantial focus of what I want to talk about. I want to talk about the kind of issues landscape, some of the policy and polyscape kind of issues we're dealing with. I want to knock on the head this ridiculous conversation about AI will transform schools, colleges, and universities. No, it won't. And I want to end by exploring 4 possible scenarios for the future that look at the balance between technology developments and equity and inclusion. So that's the kind of journey we're going to take. We currently have 148 people online. More people may join us. Now, I want to make clear this is not a how-to presentation. I have done that in the past, and you can find those if you look back at past webinars. This is more about strategy and the future of higher education. So just to make clear that we're not going to do lots of demos. There were one or two, but we're not going to do lots of demos. This is the book I've mentioned a couple of times, published this morning. You can get a discount if you follow the flyer that's in the chat, or when you see the PowerPoint when it's posted by Sarah just after I've finished, you can click on the link here and get the discount. So the big basic idea is that AI is posing a strategic and business model threat to our post-secondary institutions. And I'm taking this notion that, when you come to a fork in the road, you should take it idea from Yogi Berra, who was a baseball player, if you don't know, full of these wonderful sayings. He was once asked, why don't you eat at Chico's restaurant in New York? And he said, nobody ever goes there. It's too crowded. So he was a real sports philosopher. But we're at a fork in the road about the nature of learning, the process of teaching, the nature of assessment, and the business models that universities and colleges operate. And I think there's a potential challenge to our modus operandi, and that's why we're here today. Now, Just to give an example of some of the things AI can now do, there's a wonderful new product called InVideo, where you pose a possibility in a simple text statement. So this was just a simple prompt, and it produced a 2.5 minute video, which I'll show you now. It's a very simple statement
What does the future of higher education look like?
About where AI thinks it is going. So this is AI generated, nothing to do with me. I could edit the script and edit the images, but this is entirely generated by an AI app.
And how will artificial intelligence shape this landscape? The integration of AI in higher education is inevitable, yet its adoption will range widely. Imagine the opportunities: personalized learning experiences, streamlined administrative tasks, and more. But let's not overlook the concerns. Faculty may worry about job security and ethical implications. The balance between embracing innovation and preserving the human element is crucial. The future is here, and AI is an integral part of it. How does the high and low use of technology-enabled learning contrast in the landscape of higher education? Let's visualize two scenarios. A high use of AI could revolutionize learning, making it more efficient and dynamic, truly transforming the way we educate. On the other hand, a low use of AI could maintain the comfort and familiarity of traditional teaching methods, but risks falling behind in the race for innovation and efficiency. The level of AI integration in learning processes can significantly shape the educational experience. Now let us look at a driving issue: equity, inclusion, and access. How does AI impact equity and inclusion in higher education? Artificial intelligence, when used thoughtfully, has the potential to level the academic playing field. By bridging learning gaps and tailoring experiences to individual needs, AI can foster an inclusive, equitable learning environment. Yet, we must remain aware of potential pitfalls. If not managed with care, AI could inadvertently reinforce biases. Therefore, it's crucial that we steer this technology with a firm, informed hand. AI has the potential to be a powerful tool for promoting equity and inclusion, but it must be used responsibly. How can we view AI as a co-intelligent partner in higher education? Let's consider this. AI is not a looming threat that seeks to replace educators, but rather an ally that enhances teaching and learning processes. By working in harmony with AI, we can elevate the educational experience to new heights, maximizing student engagement and learning outcomes. It's about partnership, collaboration, and mutual enhancement. Remember, AI is a partner, not a replacement in the future of higher education.
So that's what AI thinks is the future. Now, if my good friend and colleague Audrey Waters was here, who wrote this wonderful book called Teaching Machines, The History of Personalized Learning, she would argue that that's been the proposition of EdTech since the 1920s. And it's never actually delivered on that proposition. And there's no evidence that we're delivering on the proposition right now. We've had a good 100 years of EdTech, and the results are that social and economic disparities are getting worse, not better. And that essentially what these technologies have all done, including AI, is support the wealthy versus the poor. And so there's a big set of issues around equity and inclusion that underlie the comments I want to make. So let's just step back a minute and understand something about the history of all this, because one of the things I was surprised at is the kind of shock in November 2022 when ChatGPT-3 was released. Oxford and Cambridge immediately banned it, as did about 70 other universities and colleges around the world and about 200 school districts. And you said, like, what? Where have you been? What have you been paying attention to? Let's just understand some history here. So we've had chatbots, not all of them brilliant, since 1966. The first kind of version of Siri was released in 2011, and Amazon released Alexa in 2014, which essentially just forms of AI-enabled chatbots. Google DeepMinds, who I have a strong connection with, beat the world's Go champion in 2016. And before that, a team at the University of Alberta successfully championed all sorts of new approaches to using AI in complex simulations and games. ChatGPT-1 was released in 2018, so we shouldn't have been surprised about GPT-3, except it was better, much better than earlier kind of examples of all this. And what we should also recognize is now that the industry is getting very fast growing, a very large sector. Somebody has suggested that by 2050, the AI industry sector alone will be the equivalent of about 9 Amazon companies. So we're looking at a massive growth of a particular technology. Each morning I look at, there's an AI for that, which is a website which everybody should keep an eye on. And this morning there are 12,500 AI applications available for either to buy or use. And that number grows at around 30 to 40 each day. So AI is a fast growing sector. And everybody talks about ChatGPT, but there are lots of these large language models, both open source and proprietary, that we can now begin to use. Currently, the most successful large language model is ChatGPT 4.0. They have no experience of branding. They didn't do the marketing courses we teach on the MBA. Obviously, can't think of a good brand for this stuff. But ChatGPT 4.0 is outperforming all other large language models on the standard test of these things right now. And they're not all created equally. I use a platform called Perplexity, which enables me to switch between large language models. So I can test the same prompt, the same engineered prompt, and say, look, I'm looking at this issue. This is why, this is who the audience for this material is for. Give me some examples of, and I get different material from each of these different large language models. So we have to play around with the language models to get the kind of response and inputs that we're looking for from our co-intelligent partner. Now, one of the key skills, and what's surprising me in working with our graduate students, but also with colleagues in the faculty at various institutions around the world that I've been working with, is how many people just treat a large language model as if it was a big version of Google. And so, the prompts are very crude and very simple. What Ethan Mollick, who's written a wonderful book called Co-Intelligence, How to Use AI as a Partner in Research and Development. What Ethan Mollick suggests is that you really share with it not just simply what you want, but why you want it. And the more context the system has for what it is we're trying to get out of it, the better the response will be. He also suggests that you never accept the first response. So just as if you were in a viva voce for a master's degree or PhD examination, we keep pushing back and asking more questions to get a better rounded response from the AI system we're using. So, I mean, one of the ways of thinking about what AI is becoming is to think of it as a very low paid and yet extremely intelligent graduate student who wants to work with you to help you do what it is you need to do. And the more you think about it like that and treat it as if it was a person, sharing not just what you want, but why you want it and who it's for, then your prompts will produce better results. And I think this is the skill people should be taught and learn how to develop. And it's certainly something we do with our grad students, both in all the programs I teach. Now, just to give context for the strategy conversation, I want to talk about some of the uses we've seen AI being put to in colleges and universities. So I'm just going to quickly romp through 15 use cases. If anybody's really interested in any of these use cases, drop me a note and I'll send you some examples of what this looks like. And I should mention that Contact North, the hosts of this webinar, have a number of AI-enabled, ChatGPT-enabled, free-to-use tools that you could download and use yourself. The three of them that are currently available, and there are more coming, One of them is a kind of learn anything, any level, anywhere, anytime tool, AI Tutor Pro, intended to help students pick up on knowledge and information and skills that they need to develop for the course that they're now studying. AI Teaching Assistant Pro is for faculty members to help develop curriculum, help develop syllabuses, help develop lesson plans, assessments, assignments, and detailed resources for teaching. And AI Pathfinder Pro is designed to help guide students in their learning journey linked to career. So if you want to be, I want to be a cybersecurity expert, this is the learning you need to do, and this is where you can get it. So it's more of advising, guiding, counseling, career counseling kind of tool. But these are all free. And if you go on the teachonline.ca website and go to the AI Hub, you can just download these. And I'm sure Sarah will put the link in the chat so you can do that if you want to. So here are just 15 very quick and simple use cases with a couple of examples thrown in. You can now create whole micro-credentials in a very short period of time, very behavioral in their orientation. So a lot of the stuff is kind of very cognitive, not really focused on connectivist, constructivist kind of learning designs, very traditional, I'm going to teach you this, you're going to learn it, and then present it back to me. So very much the banking model of what education looks like. But what you can do is jumpstart the creation of a new course by getting AI to do it for you. There's been a lot of work for around about 25, 30 years now on adaptive learning engines, and a huge amount of investment in this space, with a lot of that investment simply lost. Lots of large companies have been in this space and walked away from it. But Ethan Mollick and his partner have suggested some ways in which you can build adaptive learning engines that already are built in part to most learning management systems. And so they're showing effective ways to use personalized and adaptive learning. There's a ton of work, and some of the biggest levels of venture capital investment in AI have been in assessment. Particularly in generating new kinds of assessment, both formative and summative. And there are free-to-use tools, open source tools like Tau, but there are also lots of proprietary tools that will enable you to develop assessment, to generate assessments so that we can do assessment on demand. There's one tool that was developed here in Alberta that can generate 500,000 versions of the same assessment against a similar set of rubrics in science, so that you can do assessment on demand, and every student who ever calls for that assessment would have a different version. There's a big interest in chatbots, and one of the things that OpenAI has promised to do is to create chatbots for every key subject, K to 12, so that every subject, physics, social studies, math, whatever it is, will have a dedicated chatbot that's an expert in that field and can teach at any level, anything. And I think that we're going to see a lot of deployments of chatbots right across the university college spectrum, because they can be essentially 24/7 private tutors for students. And so in some jurisdictions where private tutoring is a big deal, like Singapore, that business may be radically affected by the growth of chatbots. And there are some of these tools that are now very easy to use. One of the tools developed in Ontario is called ProfBot, and you can program this reasonably quickly by sharing all the course resources and information and pointing ProfBot in the right direction for the kind of materials that are background for the work you want to do. A lot's more now being done with AI-enabled immersive simulations, especially in the fields of healthcare and in a variety of historic materials and in certain science subjects. I'm currently working with the Treaty 8 on the development of immersive Cree experience in partnership with a group of developers in Guatemala, interestingly, have done extensive work on using Apple's Vision Pro for simulation and learning, including some work with the University of Alberta. So we're in the middle of this project right now. And in particular, I think there's lots of potential uses of virtual simulations in science. So if you look at Merlot, the website Merlot, you'll see lots of examples, and the links are all here are live in the PowerPoints to experiences in chemistry and engineering. But also now increasingly, some virtual arts programs, including music and visual arts, are starting to use lots of examples of virtual tours of art galleries, watching the creation of artworks, supporting the learning of musical instruments or supporting music creation. So lots of really creative stuff happening in the humanities and art space, not just science and knowledge spaces, but creation and what I would like to call passion subjects, where people are passionate about creating new things and new music and new art. And so there's some tremendous stuff going on there with some new tools that can help us create powerful art and powerful music. One of the things I've been very interested in for about a decade is peer-to-peer assessment and peer-to-peer learning networks. And I've been involved in developing and creating several. And there's another tool developed in Ontario called critic.io, which organizes peer assessment and peer learning. And there's some really powerful faculty stories about how effective it has been in making that work effective and efficient. Lots of work emerging on using AI for project-based and collaborative learning and much more connectivist kind of learning. So there's some particularly new AI tools that can do this, and also for networking like WorkHub, which are very efficient here. Here are some of the professor success stories from Critic. I would really encourage you, if you're interested in peer-to-peer learning and peer assessment, to look at some of these examples. This is from a colleague at the University of Alberta. One of the historic uses of EdTech that's getting much better now with AI is supporting students with exceptionalities and disabilities. So there's some really powerful developments going on using AI to support learners who have visual impairments, hearing impairments, motor impairments, or combinations of impairments. So I think this is a space where historically EdTech has done a good job and is getting better. As a former counseling psychologist, I'm okay now, I'm fully recovered. Lots of work in student mental health. And one of the things that I've been fascinated with in the last 5 years is the assessment of clinical assessment, clinical counseling and psychology tools, which have been approved for use in Britain's Alberta Health Service, in Britain's health service. And some of them have been approved for use in other health services around the world. And so what we're seeing now is 24/7 counseling tools for anxiety, stress, and depression. Not particularly good for other kinds of mental health challenges, but there's a lot of work there. Now, one of the big use cases is in learner analytics, and my colleagues at the Open Polytechnic in New Zealand pioneered an approach to this where they looked at historical performance data on a particular group of courses and then advised both the staff and the students about where they were in terms of, are you in the zone of success? Are you doing what successful students have done at this stage of the course? Or do you need to adjust what you're doing to come back into the chances of completing successfully? So lots of examples of analytics. I've just written a chapter for another book in which we document 300 use cases for analytics in education, K to PhD. Probably one of the most overhyped technologies of all time was blockchain technology, but it's beginning to show itself as more and more employers no longer are interested in certificates, diplomas, and degrees, but want to know, what can you do? Give me evidence from your work of your ability to do certain tasks. So the combination of blockchain and e-portfolio is beginning to show promise. And there's some examples, particularly from the Open University in the UK and from my friends and colleagues at Validate from Vametric here in Canada, showing how powerful those kind of technologies can be. And I mentioned that Contact North has a career advice technology, AI Pathfinder, but there are other tools in this category as well. Now, if you didn't see this, it's worth having a look at. This is Sal Khan and his son, and they're going to have a chat with the voice-enabled chat GPT 4.0. Now, two interesting things about this. This was released at the same time the voice-controlled chat GPT was released. But the other interesting thing is they're using an Apple iPad. Now, Apple and OpenAI have recently announced an arrangement where they're going to share resources and share opportunities for growth of AI-enabled supports. But this is AI as a live tutor for Carl Sahn's son. Now, if you don't know who Sol Khan is, he's the founder of the Khan Academy. And so he's got a vested interest in all this because he has a business relationship with OpenAI. So have a look at this and ask yourself, what can we do with this resource for some of the students in my class that I know struggle, or some of the students in our university that don't get calculus or don't get an engineering idea or don't get some kind of idea from Levi Strauss. Let's talk.
OpenAI invited myself and my son Imran here to try out some of their new technology. And so we're curious about how good it might be at tutoring someone in math on Khan Academy. So let's get it started. It's loading up. All right, sure can see our screen.
Actually, in this form.
Hello there. I'm here with my son, and I'd love you to tutor him on this math problem, but don't give him the answer. You can ask questions and nudge him in the right direction, but I really want to make sure he understands it himself. And he's here in the room, so you can talk to him directly.
Of course, I'd be happy to help. Let's look at the problem together. Can you first identify which sides of the triangle are the opposite, adjacent, and hypotenuse relative to angle alpha?
All right, so I'm pretty sure this is the angle alpha right here, right?
Perfect. That's correct. Now, looking at the triangle, which side do you think is the hypotenuse? Remember
Really,
the hypotenuse?
I'm not totally sure. I think it might be this one, but I really am not sure. This side AC.
You're close. Actually, side AC is called the adjacent side to the angle alpha. The hypotenuse is the longest side of a right triangle and is directly opposite the right angle. Can you find which one is the hypotenuse?
Oh, okay, I see. So I think the hypotenuse is this really long side from A to B. Would that be correct?
Exactly. Well,
OpenAI invited myself.
So I'll just pause there for a minute and make one point, and then I'll look to see what Sarah says as our questions. There are essentially three big models of instructional design. Now, those of you in the room who are instructional designers will tell me, no, there are 400. Yeah, I know, it's complicated. But from just an instructional point of view right now, a lot of what we see is very behaviorist in terms of how AI thinks about learning. A lot of the developments that are learning focused are developed by people who don't teach but develop code. They're developed by people who're not in a classroom every day but think they know about what learning looks like. So they've kind of landed on the Skinner behaviorism kind of scale. And as Audrey Waters points out, that's a lot of the history of ed tech. A lot of what we actually do in classrooms, and certainly a lot of my teaching, is around either social constructivism or connectivism or some combination of both. And I think what we're beginning to see is a move of AI to enable us to choose an instructional framework and then build resources within that. but it's a long way away from delivering to expectations or potential. But it's moving very quickly. So I think we're going to be in a position to start using AI much more fruitfully in the near future. So I'm going to stop for a minute and see what questions have popped up in the Q&A. So I'm reliant on Sarah to tell me what they are.
Sure. Thanks, Stephen. So there's just one right now from Scott, and he would like to know if you've spent any time using Microsoft Copilot.
Yes, I'm kind of addicted to this stuff. So I'm addicted to writing, to collecting fountain pens and watches, and to playing with AI. So that's 4 addictions. It's enough for an old man. And I have played with Copilot, and I found it limiting in comparison to what I can do with on the Perplexity platform. So my preference is to use Perplexity, unless I'm in an Excel spreadsheet, in which case I found the Excel Copilot exceptionally helpful. So yes, I have, and yes, I would encourage people to use Copilot. The fully functioning professional version of that isn't cheap, and that's an issue I'll come on to in a minute. It's $20 US a month per user. So at a campus level, we're talking about big money. So I think we have to think about not just simply utility and functionality, but also cost benefit. And I think we can get some value from other versions of those kind of products that we'll no doubt see coming into the market pretty quickly at competitive prices. Okay, if that was the only question, I'll move on. So clearly, and you just have to read the literature, and I hope I'm up to date. I'm, currently in the midst of a second book on AI, this time focused on K-12, and I'm plowing through the vast literature that's growing at a rate of knots. And that's a problem, by the way. One of the largest publishers in the world, McGraw-Hill, is shutting down 19 journals because it's inundated with papers written almost entirely by ChatGPT or some other large language model. And it says, we just can't control this stuff. It's got out of hand. So there's an issue. Academic colleagues becoming partners in academic misconduct. And I think that's an interesting issue. We also have the highest rate of papers being withdrawn by both publishers and authors and by their institutions in the history of academic publishing. 10,000 papers were withdrawn in the last 10 months. So the big issues are reasonably obvious, and I'm not going to spend hours on these, but I am going to talk about some of the others that I think are much more interesting and more important for us. Clearly, the number one issue, according to EDUCAUSE, JISC, and all the other major players in the educational technology space, is cybersecurity and privacy. And universities and colleges are a vulnerable place for attack. So there are something like 12,000 attempts to attack data at universities and colleges every working day around the world. So this is a big issue. I think there's a question, a moral question about who's the agent here, what kind of framing is the world receiving? And I want to come back to that when I talk about homogenization later on. But I think we should have kind of major concerns about what's the moral agency of an AI application in the hands of a student or professor or both. Whenever I talk to academics anywhere in the world, this is their number one issue, and I wish they'd shut up, because it's been an issue since the Ming Dynasty, and we have no clue what to do about it. And this all happened way, way before AI. And a recent Stanford study, Stanford has been looking at academic cheating for since 1945. And they've shown that there's been no significant change in the number of students cheating. It's still about 60% of all high school students and about 65% of all college and university students. And it hasn't gone up with AI. It's just getting easier to cheat. And one of the other observations I would make is there are a growing number of examples where professors and tutors and teachers are co-conspirators with students in creating a climate in which cheating is inevitable. The more we give emphasis to grades and the less we give emphasis to learning, the more likely it is that students will cheat. And so what I think AI is demanding of us is we reimagine assessment if we want to get rid of some of the issues around academic misconduct. This is not a very popular view, but actually it's a view that many of us who've been looking at assessment and technology for 30 years have been taking for 30 years, even before AI came on the scene. The other thing to know, and this is mainly from Ethan Mollick, is that we're useless at using the detection tools. They're not very reliable. And so there's a wonderful tool called Cheat GPT, which is basically useless. It just catches people 26% of the time accurately. And Ethan Mollick's team have at Wharton, he's at Wharton, have done huge amount of testing on how good these cheat detection systems are. And his conclusion is none of them are any good. And actually, they're getting worse. So the better we are at prompt engineering, the worse these tools are at detection. And the other thing is that the detection tools will almost automatically detect somebody as cheating if their first language is not English. And so there's also a massive bias built into these detection tools. So I think there are some big issues here. And I think there's a legal liability that colleges and universities need to bear in mind when you accuse a student of cheating who hasn't done, cheating using AI who did not do so, then I think you've got a kind of legal liability issue. And there are law cases pending in Canada, the US, and Europe really about that kind of issue of false positives. So I think we have to be very careful here. And the real solution is to reimagine assessment. Lots of issues around bias. I mentioned one. Facial recognition systems are biased against people of color. There's all sorts of gender bias built into some large language models. And there's bias in favor of Western Northern Hemisphere views of the world versus indigenous views of the world, or Southern Hemisphere views of the world, or non-colonial views of the world. And so we have all sorts of bias, and hallucination is getting less of a problem, but it's still a problem. I still can't get any of the large language models to catalog all the books I have written. It gets some of them now. It didn't used to get any. So of the 42 books I've written, it's got about 30 of them now. But some of the ones it suggests I've written, I haven't written, and neither has anybody else. They just don't exist. And the other issue here is traceability or explainability. Can we trace back the thinking that AI has done to get to its conclusion or resource that it's produced? Now, you will be aware that there are massive lawsuits pending against OpenAI, but also against other users of large language models, so builders of large language models, around fair use or copyright infringements, both for textual material, like the New York Times $9 billion lawsuit against OpenAI, or music producers and creators, or arts creators, or fiction writers. Lots of lawsuits pending. So the lawsuits will be settled by the courts. And I think we might get some new definition of what fair use looks like that will not benefit anybody on this call. I mentioned this traceability. ChatGPT 4.0 was trained on over 1 trillion pieces of material. So traceability is getting stronger and better, and hallucination is getting less. But I still would like to see a lot more explainability. Now, we have Paul Prinsloo on the line, and he's one of the people that's inspired me to think about some of these bigger issues. And I think these are the real issues that we need to be addressing as we think about the place of AI in higher education. One is, imagine living in Soweto or Botswana or Chile or Edmonton and all seeing the same kind of output from the same kind of question. So in other words, a homogenization of knowledge and understanding that's decontextualized from history, culture, and space. And given that I'm working extensively with a group of people, Treaty 8, who have a completely different view of Canadian history, who have a different experience of Canadian history, this is a threat to cultural understanding and identity, and is a threat to our attempts at decolonization. So that one of the dangers is that we need to think about AI as something that we can manage locally rather than being received globally. We need localized versions of AI. In 2000, 200 indigenous technology people met in Honolulu, smart people, and they developed a protocol for indigenized AI way before ChatGPT-3 was released, which talks about local instances of AI-enabled technologies that reflect culture. So there may be a Treaty 8 version, which would be different from a Treaty 6 version of an AI large language model. A second set of issues here is learnification and datafication. This is where we see the learner as an individual and data as the product that they produce, neither of which is true. Learners are part of a learning community, and the learning in class and learning together is as important as learning on my own. And yes, I test and assess individuals, but I also test and assess the collective capabilities of students through participation and engagement activities. And if we can't measure it, it doesn't exist is a piece of nonsense, because as a teacher, I'm looking not just at what can I see and measure, but what can I feel and hear. And so this learnification, datafication problem is very significant. There's a great danger in seeing this personalization agenda as enabled me to lock myself in a basement for 24 hours to master physics 101 and never have connection with another person or with other teaching or with other forms of presence. Now, one of the great contributions of the team at Athabasca I was working with is the whole notion of the community of inquiry. And I want us to think about the community aspects of learning and how AI could enable that rather than getting in the way of that. One of the worries that many of my teacher colleagues, especially at K-12, but also in higher education have, is that we're going to sideline the understanding and experience of teachers because the data shows that something else is happening. We have judgments to exercise, and I think that's important. I've talked about bias, but some of the bias is actually built into the algorithms. And so we don't have, for example, algorithms that work well for any indigenous group anywhere in the world. Lots of issues around other kind of things here, but I'll just mention one more before I finish this slide, which is that most major transformation initiatives that involve technology fail. So the failure rates are between 60 and 85%, according to Gartner. And so we're going to look at some massive implementations of transformation technologies just to find out that they can't work. And everyone that's been around higher education for more than 10 minutes has probably experienced an attempt to do something big that didn't work well. And we have some people in the room who are former vice chancellors and presidents of institutions who would tell you, been there, done that. Given the time, I'll just stop for a minute, see if there's any questions, Sarah.
Oh, yes, we got a few lined up.
Oh, good.
Okay, so for the first one is Jillian. With discussions being so important to distance learning pedagogy, do you feel asynchronous discussions are at risk of academic integrity issues or diminished value of asynchronous with the prevalence of tools to generate posts?
Yeah, I'm teaching right now on an MBA course, and we've just had to have a chat with one student who was way ahead on their regular asynchronous posts, but every one of them we could see was a ChatGPT post, didn't have the smarts to edit them. So we had a conversation, and she pulled down some of the material and is reposting. But yes, it's an issue. However, it's a design issue. So if you're simply asking people to do reasonably standard posts, it becomes easy to use these tools to cheat. If you create real powerful dialogue where you're really engaging people in dynamic conversations asynchronously, then I think you could do quite a lot. So yeah, it's a risk, and we've been living with that risk for some time. So good question. Thanks. Next question, Sarah.
Okay, so Tracy asks, you do a lot of writing. How do you feel about AI as an author or co-author? What is the ideal partnership or line between AI writing and human writing?
Yeah, I don't think I could be as productive without it, because I'm getting it to check my thinking. So, for example, I wrote a chapter over the last 3 days for this new book on AI in schools, and then I pushed it through Claude 3 Opus and ChatGPT 4.0 to suggest what's wrong with this chapter, where can it be improved, and what new research should I be looking at. But more significantly, I'm using various tools like Research Rabbit and SciSpace to look for reference resources that relate to the kind of issues I'm raising. So I'm still in charge. I'm still doing, 90% of the writing, but I would say that 10% of the thinking is being done by my co-intelligent partner. So now from a fiction point of view, because I am trying to write my second novel and my third one, a different story. I find it very basically useless for the kind of fiction writing that I want to engage in. So it depends what you're writing, but yeah, it's a co-intelligent research assistant that helps you write smarter, better, faster. Next question, and then I'm going to have to move on.
Thanks for that, Stephen. Jerry would like to know if you have any guidance with the use of AI for grading.
Yeah, stop grading. Uh, get students to grade each other, get students to grade themselves. We have a course where we ask students to assess themselves on a set of rubrics, and then we either confirm or suggest other ways in which they should look at their performance in participation or in a particular assignment. And we ask them also to run their own view of their activities, like a research paper, through ChatGPT against a rubric. And so ChatGPT can do that assessment against their self-assessment and against ours. So we're doing lots of different things to reimagine how we can leverage these tools to support formative assessment, feedback, and so on. But I haven't set an exam in 32 years, and I have no intention of starting now. Okay, I'm going to have to press on because we only have about 10 minutes or so before we're due to finish. Quite a big section of the book deals with this question: what's the policy landscapes here? And we've got some stuff from my colleague JC Couture and I, our new book on futures thinking for school leaders, but also some stuff from Goulson and colleagues in Australia around kind of 3 models that universities, colleges, and schools could be using in terms of what they think about AI. So the idea that Goulson comes up with is there are 3 basic frames of operation a university or college could have. One is to promote the idea of AI. One is to accept it and embrace it. And the other one is to appropriate it as the new business that the college or university is moving towards. I'll come on to 4 scenarios in a moment, but I just quickly want to walk you through these kind of indicative snapshots where we have a university or college promoting AI, but not necessarily doing much about it, investing a little bit in professional development, versus at the other end of the scale, really adopting AI as a major focus for what the university does. So this is going to be more like Arizona State University, whereas the other one might be Oxford and Cambridge, the promotion one. I said, well, if you want to use it, then why not play around? Whereas Arizona State is either going to embrace it wholeheartedly or not at all. So we have this kind of scale of 3 scales of adoption. I think what you're going to see in this prognostic correlation piece is more of it being about empowering students and faculty to do more creative things. This is the appropriation framework than you're going to see in the promotion framework. So rather than just monitoring and controlling it, we want to see really intense, effective use cases, which is what we're seeing Wharton Business School doing. So for example, Wharton has an annual competition for entrepreneurs within the faculty entrepreneurship program, and they have independent judges. So the 5 judges were given 6 big business ideas from the students, except that 3 of them were generated by AI. And those 3 won top awards as some of the best ideas in that class that year. And so we're going to see more intensive applications of AI. And the more that people see AI as university leaders or college leaders as an engine of transformation, then these narratives will change. So on the slide deck, when you get a chance to really look at these, you can have a good look and see what the kind of thinking is. And I think that the kind of one end of the scale is, well, kind of use it if you want. We'll give you a little bit of training if you can fit it into your schedule, versus the kind of big appropriation kind of idea that this will all transform our business model and make our cost structure look very different. So that's the big fiction behind this. Now, I don't think one size solution fits all. So everybody around the table that's got a role to make in decision making here needs to think about the strategic intention and their business frame before they begin to embrace or adopt or use AI. And I think there are real vulnerabilities that we've mentioned, but there are real significant costs, particularly of not doing some of these things. And as the video said at the beginning, that was AI generated, if you don't play in this space, what will that mean for the way in which your potential students look at the services you are providing? Now, the slide deck will have a conversation about transformation. I don't really have time to deal with this, but I would point out, as Audrey Waters has done in her wonderful book, and lots of others have done, looking at the future of the university as a precarious place, or the colleges as a future place for skills development, that we've been in a transformation conversation since the 1960s. And that a lot of the transformation people have talked about just has not happened. And the reason for that is what Peter Drucker is said to have said, which is culture eats strategy for breakfast. And the culture of our institutions is against massive, significant, sudden change. We can do it if we have to, as we did with the COVID pandemic. But almost the minute that that pandemic was deemed to have ended, people rushed to get back to where they used to be before all that happened. And so our ability to change is incremental, not transformative. So some slides here about that. This is the Rogers adoption curve. And you're always going to get round about 15, 16% of faculty and staff really enthusiastic about the next big thing. But most people are not. So you get 40 to 50% who don't want to change, and you've got about 34% waiting to see who's going to win. And so you're going to see this kind of dynamic tension and conflict if we go down the AI adoption route rapidly. Now, this is where I want to end. I'm suggesting that there are 4 scenarios for the future. And I've mentioned some institutions here because I do know some things that are going on. And essentially, what I've said is there's a control of AI implementation that's kind of loose, i.e. not a lot of stuff going on, more like, oh, if you want to play. And at the other end, there's a really tight push to make AI part of the core business. So that's the horizontal frame. And on the vertical, we have a very tight commitment to equity and inclusion. And on the other end of that kind of vertical line, we have a commitment to equity and inclusion, but don't really know how to make it happen. And so these are the two big dimensions: technology adoption, low, high, and equity inclusion, low, high. And I think you can see some really interesting developments. Let me just mention two, and then I'll stop. One is the Smart University of Dubai, Hamdan bin Mohammed Smart University, which I should declare an interest. I've been a consultant with them since 2017. They've just announced that they're building a repository of skills. So they're looking at all of the skills needed for jobs available in the Emirates. And for every skill, they're looking at a learning pathway, a curated learning pathway for that skill. And what they're also doing is saying you can begin to build your own menu for learning. So you can do these two short skills courses and get badges for that. You can collect badges and turn it into a certificate. You can collect certificates and turn them into a micro-credential. And you can take micro-credentials and parlay them into a degree, up to 50% of an undergraduate degree and 20% of a graduate degree. So they're becoming a platform corporation, and they're realizing that the value they can add is by curating the learning journey and being engaged in assessment rather than having to teach everything. And so that's one kind of emerging use of AI-enabled technologies, and they're very much into developing the smart campus as a way of doing that. On the other side of that same half of the equation here, we have the University of Alberta, which has taken 2 years to decide to move from Moodle to Canvas, and is going to take another year to move to Canvas because people are hesitant. And so what we have is a bureaucracy gone mad, incapable of moving quickly to leverage fully available technologies and innovation. And so we have this kind of different mix of strategies. The Collegium is more about the way in which we configure and unbundle the way in which education is offered. And the last kind of model here is the Arizona State University, which is essentially just a big business. Like 20 years ago, they had basically no online students. Now it's one of the biggest online institutions, publicly funded in the US, and growing. And so we have, 4 different leverage points for the use of AI. Now, in the book, which is discounted today for people on the call, just look in the chat to get the flyer, you'll see a much more fulsome description of these 4 scenarios. So this is my last kind of point, and then I'll stop to see if there are any other questions. We're kind of pulled by AI into the future, but we're also dealing with the weight of the past. And universities and colleges are very slow to dislodge some of that weight. So history gets in the way of possibility. But we're also being pushed both by cost issues, by the really difficult problem of finding and keeping highly qualified faculty, and the growing competition for students, particularly in the Northern Hemisphere, as the changing landscape and flows of international students show itself. We're looking at this kind of history, present and past, and future rather, having a dynamic impact on our strategic thinking. And I think there's an exercise to be done about looking at a plausible future, institution by institution, about where AI will take us. And I think this means that we need to shift from this kind of form of reactive governance that institutions have in higher education to a much more anticipatory form of governance and a much more creative form of strategic planning that thinks back from the future rather than works from the present forward. So I have 134 people still on the call. Here's what you can do to think more about these issues other than buy the book. One is I think you should play. If you haven't been playing with AI tools, I think you should. And I think you should do so out of a sense of understanding what it is your students will be doing. There's a very interesting study published last week that shows that only 30% of school, college, and university faculty have used AI, but 74% of their students have. Every morning, I get 2 newsletters on every working day, Monday to Friday. Ben's Bites and Rundown AI. They take 2 minutes to read, and I keep an eye on what's developing in the business. I also look once a week at There's an AI for That to see what's new, and it's a searchable directory of every AI tool published since 2010. There's a paper by the Mollocks, Ethan Mollick and his wife, that I strongly recommend everybody read. It's a practical guide to how to leverage AI for teaching and learning. But there are also growing regulations that we all have to be aware of. Here in Canada, Bill C-27 is in committee stage, and we're going to third reading before the end of this Parliament. But there are also significant regulations in the EU, in the US, and I think 2024-25 will be the year of AI regulation. And I think we need to start pushing our universities and colleges to think differently about how we have this conversation about AI. Let's stop being preoccupied with cheating and let's talk about learning, and let's talk about reimagining teaching, learning, and assessment. So I'm going to stop the show and see if there are any quick questions because we're kind of out of time. So Sarah, any quick questions I need to deal with?
Oh boy, there's quite a few, but I'll try to pick some quick ones. Jessica would like to know, do you foresee any issues with mental health care using AI, specifically around patient confidentiality and or the use of selling information?
Yeah, there's a Danish study that looked at how a number of AI tools were being deployed in Denmark in both K-12 and higher education, and they found that 60% of these tools were selling certain kinds of data on. Quite a lot of the tools that schools, colleges, and university uses were not originally developed for that market. They've been adapted to that market, particularly CRM tools. In terms of the mental health tools, particularly the counseling psychology tools, the ones that have been vetted by the National Institute for Clinical Excellence in the UK were vetted also for security and data privacy issues, and they came out with a clean bill of health. So I would look at what the assessments of these tools have been from the profession or from a professional assessment body like the Cochrane collaboration. So I would look at what the kind of credentials are and the evaluations of these tools are from an efficacy, efficiency, and data privacy point of view look like before deploying them.
Okay, do we have time for one more, or are we going to
Yeah,
close up the show?
let's do one more, and then I'll say goodbye.
Okay, so there's still lots of questions about academic integrity, so I'll throw one at you here from Mauricio. The beauty of AI is clear, but what about the challenges that it presents regarding academic integrity as defined in our institutions?
You need to redefine academic integrity because it's now an issue not just simply about students, but also about staff. And so the rate of retraction, the number of submissions that have been made by academics to journals that essentially are ChatGPT or LLM generated is getting out of hand. And so we need to reimagine what our academic ethics look like in an age of AI. So I don't think simply trying to impose old rules on a new world is going to work. So we have to reimagine what some of these rules are, and that will be difficult. And I think that takes us into, so why are we still doing exams? I mean, it's a ridiculous thing to be doing. Why are we doing multiple choice assessments? We've known for years that these have inbuilt biases to people with certain kinds of disabilities or to gender. But we still do them. And so I think it's time to say, okay, let's have a good start from the beginning look at all these issues and not treat it as if AI is the problem, but AI is an opportunity to imagine different ways of both formative and summative assessment. So doing what we've always done will give us different results now than we used to get, and we need to reimagine what it is we're doing. Well, I'm going to stop there because I know this conversation could go on forever. My email is on the last slide that will be available on the slide deck that Sarah will post on teachonline.ca. So you can drop me a note if you need to. But can I say thank you for being here? I hope that was of interest and of value. Don't forget, in the chat, there's a discount for the book that was published today with the same title as the webinar. Do be well, do take care, and do have fun. I mean, this is a great time to experience the world as a refreshing, exciting place. Have fun. Bye-bye.